Reset Australia. If you search those two words into Google in Australia, you'll notice that you're greeted by this site. It's a website of a not-for-profit charity in Australia that has international ties to the global reset, as they tell you. Now, I have a few questions about this organisation. I saw them a few weeks ago in this article, and I started doing some digging. Why is it that they have on their board of 8, one board member who worked on the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign, another board member who formerly worked with the World Health Organization as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, along with another board member who is a former parliamentarian under Gladys Berejiklian? I've got a few questions that need answering, and I really want to get some clarity on this. Here's another one. Why is it that Reset Australia was established in September 2019, 1 month before Event 201, which is, of course, the coronavirus scenario that was run with world leaders? This is well before the pandemic started, yet we've got this organisation that is committed to combating misinformation online, especially on social media. They're committed to resetting the internet for democracy, and they're looking to combat foreign interference in our democracy. Now, before I delve into this anymore, I did want to just say that this segment is brought to you by my Subscribestar followers, the family that is behind what I do and these segments, and that allows me to make these segments and find the time to actually do it. Thank you, guys. If anyone wants to join up and support what I'm doing, please click the link in the description and it'll take you there. Reset Australia. So I first came across them from this article that I found about 3 weeks ago on the 18th of May. It's from the New Daily. It's written by Josh Butler. Now, the reason I saw this article was I saw that Craig Kelly's name came up, and obviously we've all got an interest in what Craig Kelly's up to. And this article is titled "Anti-Vaxxer Facebook Groups Explode in Number Amid Vaccine Hesitancy." And the article starts talking about how there's this explosion of misinformation online, including from a lot of anti-vaxxer groups online. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had all my vaccines except the COVID vaccine. But I thought this was quite interesting who they were targeting. Now, Josh Butler, the person who wrote this article at the News Daily, he interviewed someone from this organisation called Reset Australia. Now, that obviously tweaked my interest because this is the same organisation that says they're associated with the global reset. Of course, that ties in with Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum, the same man that wrote the book COVID-19, The Great Reset, a book that was found in Australian Health Minister Greg Hunt's office on his Instagram, as you can see in that image. Why is it that this organisation is commenting on this, and what does it have to do with the Great Reset? So the article starts talking about the issues that are happening, and it centres around the comments from this guy called Mr. Cooper. Now, Mr. Cooper's got quite an interesting background. He made the comment that he's not looking to condemn individuals. However, he doesn't feel that the social media organizations are going far enough in regulating online content and removing misinformation. That's very interesting because this is an organization, remember, that says they're committed to combating foreign interference in our elections. Now, I have one question for Reset Australia. Did you have any role in lobbying to get Craig Kelly off Instagram and Linktree and Facebook? Because after all, that would be foreign interference, right? This is an organisation, Reset Australia, that has ties to the global Great Reset, along with a number of other international organisations that are committed to woke ideology. Here are just 4 of them, for example. Some of them are based in Australia, but a lot of them are overseas. There's one called Purpose, who are exploring racial equality impact in the US and beyond. Sounds very Black Lives Matter-esque. There's another one called Mindaroo, of course being an Australian organisation who talk a lot about climate change and what we can do. There's another one called the Ethics Centre, who teach on consent in schools, especially in New South Wales, sexual consent. There's another one called Luminate, which is a global organisation, which is a major funder of civic empowerment, which seeks to reduce barriers to marginalised groups, full participation in society, improving equitable access to effective public services, and protecting inclusive participation and dissent. We know what that means. A lot of heavy language there, setting the alarms off. Why is this organisation that's partnered with a number of foreign organisations interfering in our democracy? That's my question. Are they really looking out for our best interests? Are they really looking to combat foreign interference in Australia? I have my doubts, okay? Now, this isn't a hit piece before I go any further from Reset Australia. This is an RFI, a request for information, either from Reset Australia themselves. Please reach out to me. I'm happy to correct the record or get some clarity on some of these questions. But also, if I don't hear back from you, I know that my very talented audience, who have way more expertise amongst themselves than myself, will work this out and work out what's going on. For example, I've got some questions about your finances that I'm very curious about. Now, in your last financial report from 2019 to 2020, the amount of expenses that are listed are only $52,954. That's not a lot of money for those of you that don't have much accounting experience. I've got a lot of questions about that. I mean, in the expenses there's only $43,144 used, but it's used for lobbying. Who were you lobbying? How was that working? Did you lobby to help people get censored online, or are you lobbying politicians? I'd like some more detail on that. I genuinely want to know. But I know that your total expenses for that financial year, $52,954, that's not much. I mean, you've got a board of 8 members. You've got 6 staff. What's that about? I mean, look, maybe that's because it was the last financial year and you didn't, things were just getting started. We'd only been about 6 months into the pandemic. Maybe this financial report will be more illuminating. We'll get a bit more info. But you've got 8 board members and 6 staff. And on top of that, you're about to make a new hire for a policy and research officer that's offering a salary of $65,000 to $85,000. Now, obviously, that's going to blow out the expenditure compared to the last financial year. I'm curious how you're getting funding, and I'm curious how you're going with all of that. After all, this is a not-for-profit charity. Sorry if I have a few questions. Also, what is the deal with Event 201? Why is it that you guys were set up a month before Event 201, where a simulation for a coronavirus was literally simulated with people from the media, the intelligence agencies, world leaders, all meeting on October 18th to discuss the very issue? Why is it that the organisation Reset Australia was set up in 2019, September? I'm very curious about this, and I think a lot of people are, because there are people out there that do not trust anything, anyone. They don't even trust me. They call me a plant. And it's very difficult to understand what's going on, and I don't blame them, because you see information like that and it makes them, paranoid about this stuff. What is going on? Please do elaborate. And for those of you that don't know much about the Event 201, here's an example of Corey Bernardi talking about it on Sky News the other day.
And one of those I've spoken about regularly on this program is the World Economic Forum. You remember, they're the mob of autocrats who want to reinvent capitalism, to build back better, and who think you should own nothing and actually be happy. The WEF is very influential, counting many politicians, international bureaucrats, billionaires, and hardcore socialists amongst their advocates. It's probably just a coincidence that many of these groups were also involved in a, quote, live simulation exercise to prepare public and private leaders for pandemic response way back in October 2019. That, of course, was just months before the coronavirus pandemic was declared, and it involved all the usual suspects: the Gates Foundation, the World Bank, the United Nations, the CDC in America, Johns Hopkins University, the CIA, of course, and the Chinese Centre for Disease Control. It also featured Big Pharma representatives and, oddly enough, a representative of NBC Media. Now, they're just some of the identities that were in attendance. Presciently, though, this mob of altruistic world savers went through a simulation called Event 201, which was about a fictional coronavirus pandemic. Here's what Johns Hopkins University had to say about it last year when questions arose. For the scenario, we modelled a fictional coronavirus pandemic, but we explicitly stated that it was not a prediction. Instead, the exercise served to highlight preparedness and response challenges that would likely arise in a very severe pandemic. Although our tabletop exercise included a mock novel coronavirus, the inputs we used for modelling the potential impact of that fictional virus are not similar to nCoV 2019. See, it's all just a coincidence. I mean, just because the players in the simulation are many of the same ones running the current agenda, there is absolutely nothing to see here. Move along. There is nothing to see. And just to prove it, even the link to the WF epidemic planning page is now dead. I told you, nothing to see. Anyway, managing the world has to be easier than managing your own website, so there is no cause for any of us to be concerned. Except about the next panic attack, of course. You see, the WEF seems so good at preparing for the future, it's wise to look at what they're doing now, because that might be coming down the pipe. Actually, the recent pipeline extortion in the USA is a good case in point. See, that was a relatively mild case of cyber terrorism. And coincidentally, of course, the WEF are conducting a new simulation, this time over a cyber attack that will shut down the world economy. Imagine how quickly society would disintegrate if water and electricity and fuel and other essentials were shut down due to a cyber attack. I mean, hoarding toilet paper wouldn't be enough anymore, would it? We'd have to have a new collective enemy to unite against, while, of course, demanding that government save us all. Once again, the WF is making the case that this is a global threat, which of course it is, and is a, quote, major obstacle in our path to progress. You see, there's that word again, progress, as in progressive, as in socialist. Naturally, such a threat requires a global response, which the WF is prepared to lead. It seems, you see, that every problem identified by this mob and their allies in the international bureaucracy requires the global centralisation of power and decision-making. And this latest simulation neatly fits in with their Great Reset agenda. Now, only time will tell if their concerns over a cyber attack that shuts the world will prove as prescient as their pandemic simulation. If it does, I suspect it would open up a raft of questions as to just how contrived these weapons of mass hysteria may actually be.
So these are my queries about your organisation. I genuinely want to know what's going on. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of, it's been a tumultuous last year, especially with the US presidential election. There's been a lot of misinformation, and I've also, you know, copped it a bit from the QAnon conspiracy theorists as well. You know, they're right on some things, but I've butt heads with them all the time on what really happened in 2020. But I'm curious to hear a bit more information about what you guys actually do. Now, remember, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had all my vaccines. You can't just ignore this. I do have an audience. People are asking questions about this, and I think it's in your best interest to go with the transparency route rather than perhaps banning me. I think that would be a terrible mistake. I'm actually genuinely interested in combating a lot of the same issues. I think we just go about it in different ways. In fact, my show, as you probably know, has been banned a number of different times, whether that be YouTube, Spotify, or Facebook, losing a number of different accounts. I do see value in what I'm doing. I do see value in the show that I've done in the past, The Ark, which is now on the shelf. In fact, the work I've done has helped to de-radicalize people on the left and the right. I've got testimonies that people have written into me about. In fact, it's helped a lot of people with their suicide attempts as well. It's helped to reduce that feeling in some people. So I would caution you into treating me like a extreme, you know, conspiracy theorist. My audience knows me, and Australia knows me, as a very mild guy. And smears that have been done on me in the past have not stuck. Just go and ask Crikey, who did a terrible article on me a couple months ago. So I'm curious to hear what you have to say. I'm curious to hear what's going on. If you want to handle this a bit more behind the doors, I'm not Avi Yemeni. I'm happy to talk about it. But I do want to get some clarity on these questions, because I think that if you've got ties to overseas organizations, if you're challenging and you're calling for more censorship online, I think that you might be going about this the wrong way. And if you want to correct COVID misinformation, there are better ways to do it. Also, I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on ivermectin, because that is something where the science has been incredibly vindicated on. And the fact that Craig Kelly has been taken off social media being an elected parliamentarian is reprehensible. I mean, if he doesn't have parliamentary privilege, then what the hell do I have? So please reach out to me. Send me a message on Facebook or Instagram. I'll keep a keen eye out for it, or even send me an email if you somehow find my email somewhere. But these are questions that need to be answered. So I'm curious to hear from you. But everyone else, assume that you're not going to hear from them. I'm not saying that you won't hear from them. I'm just saying, distrust but verify. It's a play on what Reagan used to say. He used to say, trust but verify. I'm telling you to distrust but verify. We're living in a world now, and our kids will grow up in a world where, there is no trust of the institutions. There is no trust of the government. Now, I'm trying to work to understand and to bridge that gap between the two, but I'm not going to sit here and spew lies that are given to us from the mainstream media and some of these organizations. So let's see if we can find the truth on this, and let's see if Reset Australia is actually working in our best interests for Australia. Now, I have my doubts. Now, again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but how many grains of sand make a heap? You guys have a great day.